Yes, there are still some people joining the session, but I will start with my introduction while there are people joining. Welcome everyone by the webinar of Omniconomics. In this partly online version of the Groene Paper 2022, the event for a sustainable future in education. Today we are all here to get inspired by Niko Roorda, but we are also here to network and connect. And this is, I say this because despite this online version of the webinar, I would say use this opportunity to connect with each other through the chat, for example. Introduce yourself in the chat and let us know something relevant about your reason to visit this session. Anyway, I am super excited to see this many people joining already, or these little circles on my screen. Great how many participants are interested in this new way of thinking, I could say. A short introduction of the team of the Groene Paper. Can you click here? Oh. This event is an initiative of different organizations. RVO, SURF, Studenten voor Morgen, de Groene Brein, but also Duurzaam MBO. And the host this year is Hogeschool van Amsterdam. And tomorrow there will be a live stream from Amsterdam with different keynote speakers and the award show of the new Sustainable 2022. You can still register for the live stream, so do that while you still can, I would say. Some short announcements. This webinar will be recorded, so it will be also published at the site of the Groene Paper. So when you do not want your face on the recording, please turn off your camera. And please keep yourself muted as well. We are now with 30 participants in the sessions, so in that way we can remain silent and listen to Niko the best we can. But if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask them in the chat. I will keep an eye on the chat. So that we can, despite this online version, it will be really nice to have an interactive session, I would say. And in this way, we can ask Niko all the questions we have. So we are here today to let Niko Roorda inspire us with his new book, Omniconomics. Niko graduated in theoretical physics and philosophy and worked as a teacher in math and physics. But 1 decade later, he changed his focus to sustainable development in education, the subject of the Groene Paper, on which he works now for more than 30 years already. I would say a real expert. And in 1991, and for the record, I wasn't even born then, he developed the world's first bachelor's program on sustainability. And after working at many different universities in many different countries on integrating sustainability into education, he received in 2001 the Dutch National Award for Innovation and Sustainable Development. And in 2018, Niko was even chosen as the Netherlands Sustainable Lecturer of the Year in the higher education category. And he wrote about 20 books, bestsellers even. But today he will tell you all about his latest book, Omniconomics. And this is even a very short summary of all you have done, Niko. And I myself am really curious. Omniconomics. Are you planning to kill the global economy?
Well, good question. No, I'm not going to kill global economy, but I do attempt to kill the economics as a discipline, or rather, I don't even have to kill it because it's already dead as a science. That is, it has never been a science, and I'm going to try to explain to you why that is. So first, let me try to share my screen. I practiced it, so it should go well. And if all is all right, you can see now everything. Great, it's coming. Yes, there we are. And I'll put this down here. Okay, I'm going to tell you about Omniconomics, and I will do this in this way. Oh, wait, now my PowerPoint, yes, it reacts. First of all, here's a summary of what I'm going to talk about. Don't try to read all this because I'm going to go through this one by one, and you will see it all. Time is short, the topic is very complicated, so I'm forced to limit myself tremendously, which I find hard, but I practiced it, so I guess it will work. If you want to read all the details, please go to my book, which is the result of 6 or 7 years of research, almost full time. The book is already available in Dutch, as you can see on the right. And the English book is coming. Unfortunately, it takes still a few months to complete it. The publisher takes a bit more time than I expected, but it will be there. And so you can already order the Dutch book, but you can also pre-order the English book. And if you are happy enough to be a lecturer in a university, you can even pre-order it for free, because that's what they do, as you know. So I'll try to be very brief and start with the first topic, which is that the global economic system is a major cause of structural unsustainability. You see, I've been studying sustainability now for about 31 years, but only for the last 6 or 7 or so years, I'm looking at the fundaments of our society, especially the economics, and I'll show you what I mean. This is just one example. In the book, you will find many examples and explanations why the current global economic system is disastrous to our society and our nature. Here is one: the fact that money attracts money, as if it were a kind of gravitation. You all know it takes money to make money, and the more money you have, the easier it gets. And I don't prove this right now. I do prove it in the book, but I'll just illustrate it by a theoretical situation in which the world, which you see now, symbolically expressed, in which money is distributed fairly equally. Each small yellow dot is a bit of money, a coin, perhaps. But as money attracts to itself, it gets to a cluster, and cluster more, and even cluster in a ridiculous way, which results in a situation in which some places are very rich, extremely wealthy. You can think of individual persons, think of Elon Musk, or you can think of companies such as Amazon or whatever, the oil companies, and other places are totally vacuum, considering from a money point of view. In other words, there's extreme poverty. Now, these stills that I showed you, like these images, they are part of a video clip that you can find on YouTube. And at the end, I will show you the link to get there. This brings me to a first possibility for a very interesting student project. And during this story, I will tell you a lot about possible student projects. And as you can see, this project can be done at the level of bachelor or master or PhD, depending on how deep you want to go and what aspect you exactly want to study. This is true for all the other student projects that I'm going to show you. In this case, it's about the investigation to the accumulation of money. Of course, a lot of research has been done there, so you can study the literature on that. You can make it a historical analysis over the years, or perhaps even over thousands of years. But you might also consider it from a theoretical economics point of view, or make it more mathematical. So there are many ways to study this question, and this is only the first example of the way you can put this topic into education. The current sustainability, and I realized that only a few years ago, is not good enough. All the efforts that we are doing right now on sustainability will lead to a glued-on kind of sustainability, not solving structural problems. And I'm going to show you why. Here are some examples, like the SDGs. The energy transition and the agricultural and food transition, and also the transition towards a circular economy. They are, of course, very important, and I'm really happy that these attempts exist. If you look at circular economy, it is well known, for instance, under the names of cradle to cradle, C2C, or donut economics, which are all variants of the same principle, of course. But they are not good enough. First of all, if you look at the SDGs, these are only short-term related. Please think of the fact that it's only until 2030, which is in 8 years now, 7.5. They don't bring any structural changes. And if you look at the other attempts, they are perhaps middle-long term related until somewhere like 2050 or so, but they too don't fundamentally change the system. If you manage to create a circular economy and make it very effective, it doesn't really change the economic structure. It just produces things that we already have, but not good enough. For instance, if you look at this one example that I gave of a structural deficiency of the economic system, money attracts money, this is not solved even a bit by all of these transitions. And that is why it has been said that Omniconomics starts where donut economics ends. I give you a few examples of very interesting student projects. For instance, if you look at the SDGs, they last until 2030. That's their goal year. What about the next set of SDGs? Please remember that they already are the third set. I don't know if you're aware, but the first set was Agenda 21, which started in 1992 and lasted for only 8 years. The second set was the Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015. And now we have the third set for, again, 15 years. You can be pretty sure that in the final years of this episode, people will start discussing all over the world about the next set, perhaps until, I guess, this time 2050. So why not take the initiative and start the discussion right now, as a student or as a researcher, as a lecturer, whatever you are. I say student project, but every time when I say student project, it might just as well be a professional researcher, a lecturer, or whatever. And another example related to the circular economy. When would you expect that the world economy could be truly or mostly circular? Can you describe scenarios on that? And can you calculate these scenarios? That would be a fascinating project, perhaps a complicated project, not for one student, but perhaps for a group of students. I think that would be a very interesting project. You see, the problem, I mentioned it right at the beginning, economics claims to be a science, but it is not by far. And I studied this very carefully. I spent a lot of chapters in the book about it. What I did was I made a definition of the concept of protoscience. You can see it here. It's a field in a transitional phase between philosophy or art, religion, magical thinking, and science, where the essence of what that discipline entails has not yet been grasped. So it's something like the very first light in the morning that should lead to a bright day, but it doesn't always. I took the sources in the literature, and based on that, I made a definition of what a protoscience is that can be used as a kind of an assessment. And you can see the 7 elements of that here. I will not explain them right now, all 7, because I don't have the time to do that. But I will take an example of one of them. But first of all, here is another example of a nice student project. If you don't agree with my very serious accusation that economics is not a science, then if you don't agree, try to defend it. Attack my definition, or attack the way I apply it. Of course, then you first have to take into consideration the chapters of the book, but you can easily read that and then see where you are. Let me take one other example. You can also use this assessment to see what the status is of other disciplines like psychology, sociology, etc., etc. You can find this assessment tool on the website of the book, which I will show you a bit later. There's one example that I want to show you, and that's the characteristic of a protoscience, that it contains a multitude of mutually struggling schools. Look, from a historical viewpoint, you might say that it all started in 1758, but then many more schools were founded. And I can show you nearly all of these schools are still very much alive and combating each other, each claiming that they have the right way to look at economics. So there's an interesting task that students or researchers might perform. You see, this map that I made is up to a certain level is subjective. It was very hard to do this. I used multiple sources and they are contradictory with each other in many ways. So it wasn't easy to make this. So I'm pretty sure that if you study this topic, you might make a different map, improve it, or even completely redesign it, and that would be fascinating. If you consider science to be something like solving a jigsaw puzzle, actually, for instance, my own field, physics, is trying to solve the puzzle that is called the universe, then it might be an attempt by several people to put pieces together. Of course, that's what you do when you solve a jigsaw puzzle. So, for instance, at a certain moment, some people might shout, hey, listen, we've got it. We've solved it. We've put those yellow pieces together, or those green pieces, or those blue pieces. And that's how you should do it. And then they all claim to have the truth. Well, that's a bit what's happening right now in economics, just as it happened in the 19th century, for instance, in biology, which was starting to be a science. Well, actually, when evolution theory got popular. This is not a science. This is not the image of a science. And so it would be a very interesting student project. Compare the paradigms of the currently dominant schools and see how they contradict each other.
Niko.
So on the one hand, you have the fact that I prove very consistently in my book that economics is not a science. But on the other hand, you have many world leaders like presidents and prime ministers and CEOs of big companies who all tend to believe that economics is a science. And this very fact causes a mortal threat to the entire biosphere, including us. Look.
Niko, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, I think an interesting one for the science part. Rinse asks, is there also a concept of post-science?
Well, I must say I've never heard of that, but well, people talk, for instance, about postmodern science. I don't know if that comes close to answering the question. You have many concepts of science, for instance, value-laden science and other things. I write a lot about the characteristics of science in the book, so if you're interested in that, you will find it. Actually, part of the book is philosophy of science, but I must say, no, post-science, no, I don't know about that. I'm sorry. Perhaps somewhere in the future, or perhaps it does exist, but I never heard of it. Going back to this situation, actually, you know, our world can be compared with something that's trying to balance on top of a steep mountain, as you can see here. And there are many threats that may result in tumbling down the slopes of this mountain. I just will show you 6 of them, 1 for people, 2 for people, etc. But there are many more than just these. You will certainly recognize each of them, and they are all from a viewpoint of systems dynamics, catastrophic attractors, trying to ruin the entire planet and the entire human systems. Now, what people tend to do to avoid these disasters is try to find some kinds of limitations, regulations, laws, and treaties and such. But I don't think that you will expect that these will be successful if the global system really starts tumbling down. Look, would you really expect that if it's forbidden to have a crashing market, that then all of a sudden the markets won't crash anymore? I don't think so. So what we need is something much more thorough. We have to go much deeper in order to create a world that is really stable. So here's a nice student project. Investigate recent attempts to stabilize the world economy. All kinds of treaties and regulations and limitations. Study them and also study how effective they really are. So we need a necessary change. For this, we need a fundamentally new economic structure, but in order to do this, it is vital that we first understand what we're doing. We should not again and again try to make improvements or corrections to the current economic system while we even don't understand it, while we don't have a scientific view on it. So first, we need a science. This was what I showed you. This is not a science by far. This is the image of a starting successful science in which, as you can see, there is a certain area where we have a shared theoretical fundament, which is one of the prerequisites of a real science. It would be interesting for a student or for a researcher to formulate minimum demands for such a shared fundament in economics. One of the main problems for economics to become a science is that the system is not closed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this concept. In physics, my own field, we use this term regularly. If a system is not closed, it leaks. Things from the surrounding area come into the system or leave the system towards the environment. That's when a system is not closed, and that's when you need externalities to explain what's happening. Look. By the way, these children, around 7 years old, are drying tobacco in Malawi. Most of these children will die from tobacco disease long before they get to the age of 20. In short, all who are not us. In other words, the economics system leaks. You can never build a complete science based on such a leaking system. It's impossible. So that's why we need to expand the system. But first, here's another student project. How do you involve tomorrow's children when, of course, the problem is that they are not born yet? Think about it. Because so many other aspects are essential to create a complete science that really tells us something, you need many more disciplines. Disciplines that you see right now are just examples. So if you're studying not economics, but perhaps molecular physics or communication science or whatever, you can be involved. You need to be involved because we need all these disciplines and many more. Here's a nice student project. So here is the task for this new Omniconomics. Design a broad, hollow way, I'll show you the image right now, towards intrinsic sustainability. Remember that the present sustainability efforts are all glued on. We need a structural solution. We need intrinsic sustainability, and that's what should start. Not tomorrow, but right now. At the same time, when we are working on these short-term and middle-long-term solutions, like the circular economy and the SDGs and so, at the same time, parallel to that, we should start working on the long-term solution. Here you have again this image of the catastrophic attractors, but that's a situation we need to get rid of. What we need is this. a situation that is much, much more stable, in which the forces don't tend to put us down the slopes of the hill, but attractors that cause us to be stable. That's what we need. How do you do that? I'll show you, but first, oh yeah, by the way, this here, investigate complexity economics, because we have something like complexity economics. People are working on that. Try to describe within that system stable and unstable attractors. Look at it from that viewpoint. You will find many fascinating details in the book. This is what we need, the broad, hollow way, because it's not a static situation that I want to describe, but it's a way towards the future. The broad, hollow way that brings sustainability for all of them. That's our task for now. And we have a lot available to do that. It's not bad news that I'm bringing. We can really do it. I'm describing in the second half of the book the road towards such intrinsic sustainability. We have things like this. Look, I describe the eightfold path to science with all kinds of new elements. As you can see, this is based on the history of science, because every time when you see a new science emerge, you will see the same pattern of new physical tools, new mental tools, etc., etc. And here too, I will give you one example, new words. Here are some words that stem from other sciences that have evolved over the last centuries, as you can see. And here are all kinds of new concepts that we have now, that we can all use to design a new science, Omniconomics, based on, and now I'll give you a small part of the clue. What we can do is we create virtual realities in which a life is defined in such a way that the economy within this virtual reality can evolve, can show evolution. That's what I think we can do, because I'm going to show you why. Here are some characteristics, all in a row. The system that we're studying is by definition complex, and it's a multi-layered network in which so many components are interacting. You know, many people say economics is a human science. I say yes, it is, but it's much more than that, because humans aren't the only players. Others say it's a social science. Yes, social elements certainly are part of the system, like local communities, villages, companies, associations, etc., etc., and on a higher level, countries and even continents, but also a biosphere with elements like ecosystems, forests. They are also part of the system. They can't be ignored, but also at a very low level, a small level, things like molecules. Think of 3D printing, in which separate molecules now can be manipulated. They are also part of the system. So it's a much more complex and multi-layered network that we're dealing with. This in economics is always underestimated. That leads to mortal threats, in which, because we have a system in which these catastrophic attractors emerged spontaneously. We didn't design them, of course, we didn't design, nobody likes them, but they emerged. And so what we need is a new system, a system in which the attractors are stabilizing, leading to homeostasis, which is a condition in which the entire economy, and in fact the entire planet, is in a situation with dynamic equilibrium, balancing stably. You cannot do this by a blueprint design, because the system that we need will be way too complex. If you even think about artificial intelligence that nowadays is not designed, not based on a blueprint, but is a self-learning system. So what we need is a self-learning system. Through self-organization and evolution, the best self-learning system that we know is the biosphere of our planet. And that's something we should imitate. What we need is evolution based on a selection principle, not survival of the fittest, but in this case, survival of the sustainables. It's all explained in the book. This means that you take all kind of characteristics of sustainability, like the eradication of poverty, freedom of war, but also a healthy environment and all kinds of other elements, empowerment, participation, democracy. And you put all those into one model, defining on that a principle of survival of the sustainables that guides the evolution. So what you have as a strategy is a lot of experiments. That's also one of the main problems of the current economics. They hardly have any experiments, and when they do, they're mostly psychological and not economic experiments. We need lots and lots of experiments because that's science. And we can do that not in the real world because experiments there tend to be unethical or even disastrous, but you can do it in simulated worlds, in virtual reality. For instance, morgues, massively multiplayer online role-playing games. That leads to science creation in which you can formulate hypotheses and test them and try to falsify them using the principles of Popper, if you're familiar with them. You can build theories, and then finally we will have a shared theoretical fundaments on which all economists and other involved scientists agree. And then from there we can build a new real life. That's the program. It sounds complicated, perhaps, but if you read it in the book, you will really understand that this is possible and that it is nice and beautiful. The result will be, if we do it, this broad hallway into the future. So, the challenge is for some students, for instance, students who are good in economics, or in biology, or in mathematics, because I think at least those three, and probably many other disciplines also, should cooperate in defining success formulae for survival of the sustainables. Very fascinating task, but then what you need is input from society, because actually you can only define this kind of sustainability if you have a social agreement in society. It's not up to scientists alone to define what kind of world we want to live in. Look, if you start looking at the biological community, the entire biosphere of the planet, then you can see that the human community is an integrated part of that, different from what many people tend to think, of course. So the community is a major player in our system, just as science and technology. Where science and technology try to answer how to create a society in homeostasis, there it's up to the human community to answer the other question: what kind of world do we want to live in? And actually, even better, what kind of world will our great-grandchildren want to live in? What kind of world do we want to leave? These two questions are very much interrelated, so it will need a constant discussion, exchange of opinions and feelings and emotions between those two, thus creating transdisciplinary science. And as I don't know what post-science is, I do know what transdisciplinary science is, and I explain it in the book, but you can also find it in many other sources. It's a situation in which the human community and science communicate actively and are involved into each other. The other main players, I think, are education and the governments. And looking at all those, there are overlapping areas such as these. And what we need in order for all this to work is very much communication through the media, through arts and culture, and especially through a broad societal discussion, which is the best kind of democracy that we have. I won't go into the details because of the time, but that's what I propose. And of course, then funding will be needed because all the time, well, you know, money is always essential, unfortunately. These players all should work together as a clockwork. And so there are some very interesting projects possible. One is a student project starts such a broad societal discussion about this question: what kind of world, what exactly is sustainability? Where should we head for? You can do this on a very modest scale, for instance, only the students in your own class. Or you can do it at a larger scale in the village that you live in, or the city that you live in, or the political party that you may be a member of, or whatever, an association, a student group, or finally, perhaps if you can find cooperation with others, also a broad societal discussion at the level of our country or even more. So try to do that, try to find together what actually do we want as a kind of world. Striking thing is that, as you know, I've been working for more than 30 years about sustainable development, but I hardly ever see attempts to answer that question. What actually do we want? It's so much missing. It's crazy. Looking at the left, at education, there are more possibilities. For instance, if students and lecturers work together, they might develop an interdisciplinary minor on Omniconomics. And my dream in this respect would be that it would be a minor in which students from various universities work together. Wouldn't that be great? A lecture project, integrate Omniconomics into the major of the economics studies and econometrics and related studies. So you can see there are so many tasks that can be taken up. For instance, also, well, if you want to do this in a really effective way, some kind of funding will be needed. And of course, you can think of Erasmus Plus and all kinds of subsidies, but perhaps even crowdfunding would be partly a solution. Let's see if this can work. I showed you in the course of this presentation a lot of student projects, which are also projects that can be done not by students, but by researchers and lecturers and all kinds of other people. And you can do all those tasks at a very deep level, perhaps leading to a PhD research, but you can also do it more easily. And then it might be a thesis for a bachelor study or somewhere in between. Here are some more examples, and I'm aware that you can't read this all. So what I did is I put it in a PDF. And if all goes well, you will find a link to that PDF where you can download it in the chat right now. Thank you.
Yes, it's there.
And then you can study it more. But please try to understand that this is not all. This is only some first idea of all kinds of tasks within the framework of Omniconomics that you could take up. I'm pretty sure that if you put a group of students and researchers and lecturers and everyone together, that within 30 minutes or so, you will have at least tripled this number of tasks. So there are so many ways in which you can start working on all this. You can see on the left that all kinds of disciplines can be involved. And if you study in a discipline that's not there, that's the challenge. Please see what you can do. I'm pretty sure that every discipline can be relevant for this. So my final slide. There's a lot available. First of all, the book, as I showed you. The Dutch book is available. The English book can be pre-ordered right now, and you will have it in a few months. There's a website, which you can see here, where you can find 28 appendices, and that's because when I was writing the book, I found out that it would be too much, way too much. So I took a few hundred pages out of the book, leaving a book of about 300 pages, and the other 200 pages were split up in 28 appendices, and you can all go to the website and download them. You will find reviews. You will find several mathematical models in the shape of spreadsheets. You will find computer simulations, programs that you can run on the computer, on Windows, I must say. So not Apple's, sorry. And you can also find a lot of videos that are mostly recordings of simulations. They are on YouTube, and you can find the links on the website. So these are all available, and this leads to a student project that I could propose, study the 28 appendices and the book, of course, and then rewrite them if you don't agree with them, or expand them, or even write new ones. And if you do this in cooperation with me, so please, if you make plans to do that, then consult me. If I judge that your products are solid and worthwhile and scientific, they will be put on the website and people will be allowed to read them, of course, with your name on it. Stands to reason. There's also available tomorrow, when I will go to Amsterdam to the Groene Peper meeting. I won't be there from the very start because I'm traveling from quite some distance. But at the latest, at lunch, I will be there. So if you want to meet me and talk about this, please do. This is what I look like. You can also phone me, mail me, reach me through Teams or whatever, or make an appointment and come to my office in Brabant. You're welcome. You're very welcome. And it's a very special opportunity. On Tuesday, June the 7th, there will be a workshop which will last for nearly an entire day, starting at 11 and ending at 4 in Rotterdam, organized by Rethinking Economics Rotterdam. And you're very welcome to come there. Then we will have really the time to make a fast step on this entire adventure. And you can see the link on the right. And I say, yes, you are nodding, Femke, thank you. I think you've put the link in the chat. So I invite you, if you find this interesting, to immediately, don't wait, just now go to this link and register, and then you will be very welcome, and we will work together on this. Finally, wouldn't it be nice to have a project of several students in whatever phase you are, bachelor, master, PhD, or researchers working on a university or wherever? If you think you can contribute and you're interested in this, wouldn't it be nice if in a couple of years my book on economics, Omniconomics, is already outdated and we have created a new version, all of us together, perhaps with including your name on the cover. That's what I wanted to say, and I hope I will receive your questions and comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Niko. I think we have still some time left for a short question. I don't know, Rinse, maybe you want to unmute yourself because you had a very interesting view on the European war system in comparison with this economy. I don't know. Yes, if that question is answered.
It takes a while. You hear me now, I think?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, but the computer had to think about whether or not to open my microphone. I thank you very much, Niko, for the interesting lecture. And it is answering a lot of my questions I had over the years, about circular economy or duurzaamheid in Dutch. On the University of Twente, we had a course. There was one lecturer, one professor who was very interested in sustainability, but the students were not. They were they were very angry that there was one whole course on sustainability. This was by this public administration of bestuurskunde. My thoughts are, well, we have been starting, and you cannot agree with me, but I think we have started a war in Ukraine now, because our interests all over the world are depending on it, because of our political political situation with Russia. We since the Second World War, we as Europe and America divided the world to have a very nice life, but some parts of the world did not, and one of those parts were Russia and China, of course, and now they are coming out of the shells, which USA didn't like. As this war started there, and as we are promoting it with buying a lot of guns and giving it away to them, it seems to me that we are not really trying to difficult in English. We're not really trying to help the sustainable environment, because we still want to maintain the economic system we built in the 1950s, which was, of course, gaining money. That's the idea of this economic system. What is your opinion about that? Not about the war. I mean, there's a lot of different opinions, but about us, EU and USA, of course, maintaining the economic system we have, which is gathering money, which does not help sustainability. That's a question, Femke.
Thank you. Well, first of all, yes, I think looking at the war in Ukraine, there are many causes and backgrounds. One of them certainly is economic by nature. When you say this started in the 50s, I would say it started even much earlier, hundreds of years ago, at least. It is true that this system is largely based on trying to gain profit, in which profit is defined in a very poor way as gaining money. We all know that there are so many values in life that cannot be expressed in money, and there's a main problem of the current economics. Such as the love of your dear ones, to name only one. I go deeply into the details in the book because I think you're right in accusing the economics of this. And I think there could be improved such a lot if we can redesign the system. That's one of the reasons why we can't just make amendments, improvements on the current system. It doesn't go deep enough. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Niko. I'm looking at time, and we're running out of time here, so that's unfortunate. But I don't see any other questions. You left your contact info at your previous slide, so that's good. If anyone has any questions, I think they can contact you anytime,
Yes.
or be there tomorrow as well. Of course, at Groene Peper in Amsterdam.
Could I ask this last question? You said it started hundreds of years ago. Could you say when? Because then I missed.
No, I can't say when, because it depends on how you look at it. You can say it started at the start of the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years ago, but you could also go back for a few thousand years. No, so that's very complicated. That's not one answer.
Middle Ages, that can also be. Okay, thank you for the answer.
Yeah. Yes, if someone would like to meet me tomorrow in Amsterdam, you may consider to send me an email. Then I know that you want to meet me. I don't know how many of you, of course, are going to Amsterdam tomorrow, but perhaps we will meet. It'd be really great. And I definitely hope to see you again in Rotterdam on June the 7th. That would be amazing.
Yes. So thank you, Niko, for this inspiring session. Good to see as many questions in the chat and the fruitful discussions over there as well today. A few more things. Tomorrow, everyone can expect an evaluation link in their mailbox. Please fill in this form because that will be of great value for us. You can still register for the live stream for tomorrow's event. And the next date of the Groene Peper is also known. That will be the 22 to the 26th of May of 2023. Yeah, thank you again, Niko, and thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you all tomorrow or next year. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thank you all.